It is that time now once again for getting lumped up with my friends. It's RockerMike and Rob that you should know, and you'll find them here on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show.
Hello, people, and welcome to another episode of The Rock Show. And today we're talking Frank Zappa, and we have a special guest from parts unknown, Mr. Dan Scott.
Dan Scott, right here.
Can you put your mask on real quick just to see what it says?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Dan has a custom-made mask here.
It's a very nice mask.
Yeah.
And this.
And he gives his gratitude to the China virus. Thanks, China.
Thank you.
Thanks, China. Thanks, China.
So
It's also Mr. Scott's birthday. So
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Happy
bastard.
birthday.
Thank you, sir.
All right, everybody.
So this is
yeah.
episode 95, right? Did I say that before? Of The Rock Show.
It could be.
95, 5 more to
100.
100.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is a special show. If you remember, everybody voted for the December schedule, and Frank Zappa got the most votes, so that's the first show we're doing. We're going to do 2 more of the shows that you guys voted on, so thank you all for that. And anybody that's been worried about me, yes, I'm alive. I've been in Facebook jail for 2 weeks, and people have been concerned if I didn't get shanked in Facebook jail or whatever.
This is funny, Frank saying, go vote.
Go vote. Right. Okay. So let's make a little salute right here.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers, everybody.
Hold on.
And we got a big program today. I got 30 pages of notes. Cheers.
I know some stuff.
This guy's a big Zappa head. That's why I wanted him to come on.
So how we gonna start this show? What you guys want to start? Because Frank got a long
Frank's got a long career. We're gonna just start at the beginning.
Can I just tell you something? I saw a little documentary about him, and he was shitting on music video.
Yeah.
He said they'll cost like $100,000 to make, but you need to make one now. But the record company don't even pay for you, or this and that. He was like fucking like, he shitted on everything.
You know,
I was like, wow.
I will say this. All right, my whole life I've had like a deep respect for Frank Zappa, and honestly, I couldn't get into a lot of his music. Some of it I really like, some of it I'm just kind of like it's way out there. But doing the research on this show, like I learned a lot, and definitely started to like some of the stuff that I kind of didn't give a big listen to before. So thanks for that.
And I like to give a shout out to all the people on the Rock Show. The Beatles Revolver hit 10,000 on the podcast, and it's hitting and they got about 100 people right now. I just put the video and it hit 100 so far. We got a bunch of reviews on it too.
Okay, great.
So you know what? Thank you for the people out there listening. You know what? Go to our Patreon. Let's find a way to support the show. The T-shirts. RockerMike still needs to make a T-shirt.
I gave you one. What happened with that?
Oh, you wanted to make that? Oh, that one. That one. Oh, I'll do that. Yeah, you know what?
You didn't know that was the one?
I got a brain fart, man. I'm not.
It's a subway train. It says crime.
Oh yeah.
Across.
Oh yeah. I put that. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll see
2 extra large.
Get a couple extra larges.
All right. So let's go.
Let's start at the beginning. Mr. Frank Zappa. He was born December 21st, 1940, in Baltimore. His parents were of Sicilian, French, Greek, and Arab descent. Italian was spoken often in his house. Now, his father's name was Francis Vincent Zappa. Interesting guy. He was a chemist, he was a mathematician, and he worked in the defense industry. His line of work kind of kept him moving around. The family had to move around a lot. And after some time in Florida in the 1940s, the family returned to Maryland, where Frank's dad was working at a place called the Edgewood Arsenal Chemical Warfare Facility. Okay? So this is a place that made mustard gas.
Holy shit.
And he mentions it in some of his songs. In case of emergencies, the neighborhood would have, people in their homes would have gas masks in case anything was released into the air. This had a big effect on Zappa, right? His lyrics would mention these things later on in his life. He would reference things like germ warfare, his ailments that he had, mention of the defense industry in some of his lyrics. It was always a topic. Now, mention of ailments in Zappa's music were because he was sick often as a kid. Okay. Yeah, he had bad asthma. He would get earaches. He would have like sinus issues, things like that, all the time. He had problems breathing. Well, this is before he smoked.
Yeah.
So he even had a doctor one time, and I thought this was bizarre. A doctor one time inserted radium into his nostrils.
Holy shit!
Right,
Why?
radium pellets.
Yep.
All right, radiation.
Yeah.
They didn't know at the time how dangerous that would be. Okay, and it was supposed to clear his sinuses. Yeah, it would, but
clear everything else.
Clear.
I'm surprised that he hasn't had any cancer or all this shit that he's been.
Well, he died of prostate cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been related to that.
You know, did that create it? I mean, did that create it? Because you know what, with those
Who knows?
radiation and shit.
Who knows? You know, but the longer the family lived near this chemical plant, the more Zappa was sick. So Zappa years later claimed that he probably was exposed to some kind of mustard gas. Okay, but he didn't know for sure. So his health was a big concern, and the family had to move. So they moved to Monterey, California. His father got a job teaching in metallurgy. Okay. And
was he teaching chemistry?
Well, no, metallurgy is like making metal molds and things like that. Okay,
That's why he would go to chemistry since he was.
He was a chemist, yeah. I don't know, but he taught at the Naval Postgraduate School.
Oh, okay.
So they would eventually, after Monterey, they would end up in San Diego. Now, at Mission Bay High School, Zappa, who had developed this big interest in music at that point, joined the high school band as a drummer.
Yep.
And his musical interests were all over the place, very eclectic. He liked R&B. Okay, he liked guys like Johnny Guitar Watson, Guitar Slim. He was into doo-wop music. He had one of the most extensive doo-wop record collections by anybody. Okay, but he also liked what was called modernism. All right, things like Igor Stravinsky, Anton Webern, and Edgar Varese. All right. Funny story about Varese, we'll get into in a minute, but Zappa was very interested in modern classical music, which is Varese, basically, things like that. And he was also into the Puccini operas that his grandparents used to play around the house. Yeah, he liked that a lot. But in 1956, the family would move again within California to a place called Lancaster. It was a small farming town in the Antelope Valley in the Mojave Desert. It was near Edwards Air Force Base. Zappa's mom at the time was very supportive of him with his musical interests, and she got him on his 15th birthday for a present. She got him a phone call to Edgar Varese in New York City. Okay, because he was such a fan, she wanted him to speak to Edgar. Unfortunately, Edgar wasn't home. Yeah. Okay, but he did speak to his wife, and she invited him out, and everything. And then not too long after the phone call, he got a letter from Edgar. Edgar was like in Europe at the time, and obviously couldn't talk, but he ended up writing him a letter, and he invited him out, and he said, if you're a big fan, we could meet and everything.
I've actually heard that Edgar Varese album.
I have too, yes.
Yeah, my friend had it. It's eclectic.
Definitely.
Let me tell you, he played some weird shit, man. Like the music there was nothing, like everything was from left field. Like any of the song, and even the title of some of the songs.
But the lyrics were so fucking clever.
That's the thing. They asked him this, what kind of music do you write? He says stuff you can't tap your foot to.
Yep, that's true.
Unless you're into odd time.
Why did they call him the godfather of comedy rock?
Because he did that before anybody.
But what's comedy?
Some of the lyrics were hilarious.
Some of them are just...
When I think comedy, I think like Weird Al. Oh yeah, like Weird Al.
Well, Weird Al was definitely influenced by that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Oh, he's like totally Zappa.
Totally influenced. So it makes sense to him to be the forefather of that.
Yeah.
But now, when he spoke to Varese, he ended up when he got that letter, he ended up framing it. He kept it for the rest of his life. He loved that. Now, at the Antelope Valley High School, Frank met Don Glenn Gliette. Now, if you remember Rob, who that is, Captain Beefheart.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he would become Captain Beefheart. They were very close friends. They both had a strong interest in R&B. Strong interest in R&B. blues and other kinds of interests like film. Okay, they were interested in making movies. Zappa was playing drums in a local band called the Blackouts at the time. Now, also in the band, that Blackouts band, was future Mothers of Invention member Euclid James Sherwood, also known as Motorhead. Okay, Frank was getting interested in guitar at that point, also playing guitar. And in 1957, he got his first guitar. His eclectic musical tastes grew to include Howlin' Wolf. He was into Howlin' Wolf.
Howlin' Wolf was great.
Egyptian composer Halim El-Dabak. Okay, if I'm saying that
You
right.
think that's why he produced Captain Beefheart? Because everybody could put Captain Beefheart to like Howlin' Wolf. Remember with the special?
Well, they were listening to Howlin' Wolf together.
Yeah.
They were friends.
So that's why, because he definitely got influenced by Howlin' Wolf.
He definitely had
same vocal, yeah.
Well, I mean, he patterned his vocals after Howlin' Wolf.
Yeah.
You know,
it was amazing.
In his senior year in high school, Frank was given to writing and arranging, and he did some like avant-garde composing for his high school band. Okay, and the high
English
school
teacher, Don Cervantes.
Don Cervantes. Okay, I know that name. What is that?
He was his high school English teacher.
He's the one that pushed him.
He actually wrote a score for him. I believe it was called The World's Greatest Sinner or Run
Yes,
Home
that's
Slow.
we're going to talk about The World's Greatest Sinner because it's a movie that he scored.
Yes.
He would graduate in 1958, but in 1959 he left home. Okay, which is I love when kids leave, like right out of high school, right? They don't do that. They don't do that no
I
more.
got 2 more years.
So in 1959 he left home and he got a small apartment in the Echo Park section of Los Angeles. Which was a bad neighborhood. Right. Here he had some private studies.
Like Mexicans?
Yeah.
Gangman.
Chicanos.
He references it
a couple of times, yeah. Now, he had some private studies with a guy named Professor Carl Cohn of the Pomona College. And it was here that he met Kay Sherman, who he would marry in December of 1960. He got a job in advertising at that point, straight job. It would only be for a short time, but the short time that he had the job, he learned the advertising industry, how it works, how to promote yourself, and all that stuff, and it would be a strong influence for his whole career, how he would do things on his own. Now, Frank, in his early 20s, he tried to earn a living as a musician and a composer.
Yeah.
And he started briefly a new version of the Blackouts and would often do nightclub gigs to try to, highlight some new material that he was writing. And he also did the soundtrack for this low-budget film. There were 2, actually, he did. One was called The World's Greatest Sinner, and one called Run Home Slow.
Can I tell you, I've never seen those movies.
World's Greatest Sinner shows up on Turner Classic Movies once in a while. It's a crazy fucking movie.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's a B movie.
Years ago, I saw it, brief parts of it. I've never seen the whole thing.
Run Home Slow, I've never seen. But he did the score for these 2 movies.
Yeah.
And it actually gave him a little bit of an income.
Right.
That he could sort of live off it in a cheap apartment in a cheap
Well, he
neighborhood.
said at that time he was living off of bologna sandwiches and peanut butter.
There you go. Sometimes
Like,
together.
who isn't?
Sometimes together, too.
Yeah.
He also would write and produce for local artists.
Yep.
All right. He started working with singer-songwriter Ray Collins and producer Paul Buff. Now, Buff owned a studio called Powell Recording Studios in the Cucamonga area of California.
Cucamonga!
The studio featured a unique, one-of-a-kind 5-track tape recorder that Zappa actually built himself.
Wow.
And studios in those days were usually at the most 2 tracks.
Yep.
Okay, you would be stereo,
Yes.
or if you were 1 track, you were mono.
Yeah.
My records used to come out in mono.
Mono, yeah.
At that point in '63, he was, treading water, doing his musical thing as much as he could. He actually attracted the attention of talk show host Steve Allen.
Yes.
Okay, who had a late night show.
Yes, he did.
And Steve Allen asked him to come
Was
on.
Steve Allen like the original
He-
Tonight Show?
That was Jack.
That was Jack Parr.
Oh, all right.
But Steve Allen was around that same time.
he
It was
was
Steve
Jack
Allen's
Parr's.
show.
Yeah, I remember.
He was
seeing,
Jack
like,
Parr's
seeing,
competition.
Competition.
Seeing stuff.
He
for
was
that.
the competition.
Okay.
Jack Parr was the first Tonight Show. But Steve Allen it was the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Allen was actually pretty off the wall. If you watch some of the stuff, he was way off the wall. But this is the famous episode where Zappa comes on and he plays a bicycle as a musical instrument. Okay.
And the famous line is, "I've only been playing the bicycle." And he says, "About 2 weeks."
Yeah,
About 2 weeks.
That
was like, about 2 weeks.
And he's in a suit and everything. His hands all
Clean
slicked back.
shaven,
Yeah. Doesn't have his mustache or nothing. But you can tell it's him. Right, the imperial thing on his chin. He used a bow on the bicycle. He used drumsticks on it. And he even blows into the spokes while he's spinning the wheels around. But he plays a song. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's like he actually has like a song.
He really did it.
Yeah. Now, his musical collaborations with Captain Bickford would kind of begin here, where they recorded in the PAL studios under the name The Suits. Okay.
Yep.
SOOTS. And he tried to get them signed to Dot Records, but they were like, "No, you guys have no commercial potential whatsoever."
Commercial potential.
So he got rejected, and Zappa would later kind of put that story on the sleeve of Freak Out.
Yes.
He talked about it, the first Mothers of Invention album. In '64, his marriage was falling apart, and he ended up moving into the PAL studios directly, so he could work there. Right, he could work there 12 hours a day. He took over control of the studios, and there you go. That's right. He's playing a bicycle right there.
It's right
You
there.
can see that on YouTube. It's fucking
On
hilarious.
YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it on the link then.
Okay. All right. Good. Paul Buff, who owned the studio, went on to some other projects.
Yes.
And let Frank run the place, pretty much.
Right.
So he called it Studio Z. He changed the name to that.
Studio Z.
And he began performing in local bars at that point as a guitarist in the band The Mothers.
But before they were the Mothers, they were the Soul Giants.
The Soul Giants.
Yeah.
Right. He would change the name to The Mothers, and there's a connotation with that where it means like motherfucker.
Yeah.
Okay.
They made him split
But
the of invention.
right, eventually he had to add the of inventions. But he would get into some legal trouble when he started working with Studio Z. Police, there was a write-up about him as a local film scoring producer kind of thing. And the police thought he was making pornography.
Yep.
Oh.
Okay. And he wasn't. Okay.
What?
But they thought he was.
What was the name of the movie? The King
World's Greatest Sinner.
Was it?
Well, he didn't make the movie.
Was that?
No, it wasn't porno.
Was it nudity? A lot of nudity?
No.
Oh.
No.
So why did they take this porno?
I don't know. They thought they didn't think specifically that was
He
porno,
was
but,
weird looking.
but he was a weird guy, and they said, there was a write-up about him in the paper that he's involved in the film
Yeah,
industry.
they called it the,
So they
the movie King of what was that?
The movie King of Cucamonga.
Cucamonga.
Yeah.
To the local police suspended.
Right. It was a local paper.
There's an
Okay.
actual song he writes years
Yeah,
ago.
so-
called
Yeah.
It's
He
on,
talks about it.
I thought
It's
that's
on
what
Bongo Fury.
I thought that's what the Ninja Turtles say.
It's a real place, Cucamonga.
Yeah, it really is.
Calamunga?
Something like Cucamonga. What the police did was they set him up. Okay, they sent an undercover vice squad officer who offered him $100 to produce a sexually suggestive audio tape for a bachelor party.
Yep.
Okay, an audio tape, not a video.
I know, but that's
Right.
so it's
So,
sad.
well, in those days, that could be pornography.
Jesus Christ.
Right. And you got to remember, California in the '60s, early '60s, was a very conservative place.
Oh yeah.
That may not have happened in New York, but it would have happened there.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Zappa and a female friend, he accepted the offer. So a female friend and him got together, and she had she put on a voice like she was having an orgasm, and
And what she did was she jumped up and down on the bed.
like she's getting
He recorded
Yeah.
it.
And he
That's all he did.
Yeah.
He didn't
And she was just like
penetrate or anything.
moaning. It was an audio tape. It wasn't video. So when the vice officer came back to get the tape and pay him, the press was actually ticked off about this too. Okay.
Too, huh?
Yeah, and he took the money and he got arrested.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah,
The cops busted
conspiracy
him.
to commit
Conspiracy to make pornography. Okay.
That did save him in the future.
We'll talk about that in a second. He got, what happened was, conspiracy to commit pornography was the charge.
Yep.
They raided the studio, They took all his fucking tapes, everything. Okay, so he lost like all of it. All right. He ended up getting a 6-month felony charge reduced to a misdemeanor and 30 days, but he had like he actually only served 10. Okay, but
he was in Tank C.
He was in Tank C, which is a song. Yeah, which is a song. But the imprisonment would leave like a permanent mark on him. Obviously, he would write a song about it. But what it did was, and this is one of the things I loved about Zappa, he had this like anti-authoritarian stance with everything. He just was like, "Fuck you all! I'm all about freedom of expression, freedom of speech," and he was like that for the rest of his life after that.
He was very about also self-education and you teaching yourself and you learned it. And he was like he was a fucking smart guy, man.
When he didn't believe in school the way we do it. Okay, he believed that people should be taught according to how they learn.
He told all his kids to drop out. They all did.
Yeah. Were they homeschooled?
I'm sure.
Maybe.
But he was a champion of freedom of speech because when he was at the Garrick Theater,
Lenny
Bruce used to open up for him.
Yes.
He loved Lenny.
and he actually produced Lenny Bruce's last album before he died. Right. And unfortunately, with this arrest, he did lose all his stuff in the studio.
Yeah, he lost like 30. He lost like out of the 80 recording, he only
Something
got like 30 back.
Yeah, he only got a few back. Now, in the spring of '65, Ray Collins asked Frank to take over for a spot as guitarist in the R&B band called the Soul Giants.
Right.
All right, and he had been in and out anyway with them, hanging out with them and stuff like that. Ray had a falling out with the original guitar player.
Right.
So he asked Zappa to join. Zappa accepted, and immediately, Zappa being Zappa, he kind of took over the band.
Yeah.
Okay. He had that personality, he'd take over whatever he was involved in. He quickly became the co-singer. He was another vocalist, and he convinced the rest of the band to start playing his music.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the band renamed themselves the Mothers.
I think the reason they did that is because they probably had a better chance with the music he was putting together.
I think that they
record the album.
You're right. I think that they looked at what he was doing and said, "Wow, this guy's
we got
talent."
They were also tired of playing in the bars around California, and you had to play a certain set to make people drink, get them horny, so they drink some more.
Yeah, play
if you
covers.
played originals, you'd be thrown out.
It was, and the music industry was like that on the East Coast too. In New York clubs, if you played originals, they didn't want you. They wanted you to know his songs they knew, which was ridiculous. Punk scene came out. But now, the Mothers actually changed their name from Soul Giants to the Mothers on Mother's Day. Okay, it was a coincidence. So Frank was connected with a manager named Herb Cohen. He knew this guy. And he assisted that he would take on the Mothers, and he assisted getting them into the Los Angeles underground scene. In early '66, record producer Tom Wilson spotted them playing the song "Trouble Every Day," which was about the Watts riots. All right, that had just happened like a year earlier. Right. Wilson had produced Bob Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel, and he was one of the few, really one of a handful of black producers that were on the scene at the time. There weren't that many black producers.
And he was good. Look at the people he produced.
Wilson got them signed to MGM Verve. Okay, MGM was the main label, Verve being the subsidiary.
Verve in those days was not a slouch label.
No, it wasn't.
It's a very predominant
jazz label. It was mostly a jazz label. But do you know who was on Verve at the same time? Who? Velvet Underground.
Oh shit!
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. Which, and I think there's the Velvet Underground were kind of like the East Coast Mothers in a way.
Yeah, but
this avant-garde.
I never thought of it that way.
I mean, different, but an avant-garde. Different but same. Yeah, exactly. Verve had one condition in the signing. They had to change their name from Mothers to something else, and the suggestion was the Mothers of Invention. The reason being is Mothers had a connotation of being like motherfucker.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to have any problem with that. So they agreed. And Mothers
Out
of
of
Invention,
necessity.
out of necessity, they agree. Yeah,
I've read that. That's what he said.
That's actually a great name of a band.
it is. It wasn't bad. So immediately they began working with Tom Wilson on what would become the debut album, Freak Out. In the Sunset Studios in Hollywood, Wilson got them a full studio.
Wilson sounds familiar.
Because he's produced Simon and Garfunkel
Yeah,
and Bob
yeah.
Dylan. Yeah, and other
I
people.
think he's still around. I think he's not producing.
Is he alive? I think he's alive.
I think he's
Yeah,
alive.
I think he might be.
Yeah, Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde.
That album. Yeah, exactly. Which was a big hit.
Yeah.
It was a huge hit. The album Freak Out is an interesting mix of all the things that Zappa was into. Right? You got doo-wop, R&B, orchestral music, and kind of like experimental sounds that was part of the Freak Out LA scene, and which was avant-garde. Right, exactly like you're saying. Now, just to kind of understand the two scenes in California, you had your San Francisco scene, and then you had your LA scene.
Yeah.
Totally different. The LA scene, I mean, they were hippies, but it wasn't like the, yo, peace and love, man, kind of like. It was a little more like they were doing drugs, but it was just out there. More avant-garde. Kind of probably more what was going on in New York in relation to what was going on in San Francisco.
Sort of like Warhol Factory type stuff. But
yeah,
West Coast.
But West Coast version of that, which I'm sure. I mean, I know the Warhol crowd, the Velvet Underground, hated going to California in general.
Yeah.
So they probably didn't like each other, but they maybe had a few things in common.
Yeah.
Okay, so the lineup of the Mothers album was this: it was Frank on vocals and guitar. You had Ray Collins also on vocals, and he played tambourine.
Yes.
Okay, Roy Estrada, bass and vocals. You had Jimmy Cole Black,
The Indian of the group.
the Indian of the group. That's right, on drums and vocals.
The Native
And
American.
guitarist Elliot Ingber.
Who wasn't?
Yeah.
He had a different name. He joined
He
another
would
band.
he would
and
use a
changed his
different right. He would use a different name later on. Now Tom Wilson had kind of promoted to MGM Verve that the Mothers of Invention were like a white blues band.
Yeah.
Which they really weren't. They were kind of far from that.
Yeah.
What they were doing in the studio for Freak Out was kept quiet for as long as possible. But word kind of started to leak out what they were doing,
Yeah.
and trouble started. There was a track that they wanted to work on called "The Return of the Son of Monster Magnet." Okay, and the track it's the last track on Freak Out. It's like an 11-minute song.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be much longer. It was supposed to be like several pieces combined. Yeah. Okay, and they needed more time in the studio to record it, and MGM wouldn't give them the money for it. Right. So when you listen to Freak Out, the last track, they put it out as an 11-minute song, but Zappa always felt it was incomplete because it was,
Yes.
and wasn't happy with the way the album came out because of that. Interesting enough, Monster Magnet, we had a band in the 90s called Monster Magnet.
Yeah.
Yes.
But in the 60s, do you remember what a Monster Magnet was? Because we probably had it as kids in the 70s too. It was a toy. It was a toy by Whammo.
Oh, the one.
It was like a magnet.
Yeah.
It was called a Monster Magnet. It had it was a different shape or something like that, but that's what it was. Now, while recording Freak Out, Frank moved into a house in Laurel Canyon with a friend named Pamela Zarabika, and she appears on the album. Okay. Soon the house kind of became a center for a lot of LA musicians and groupies. Now, when you say groupies in LA at that time, you got to talk about the GTOs, right? Girls together, outrageous with Pamela DeBar and the crew. Okay.
Miss Christina.
Miss Christina.
Who's on the cover of Hot Rats.
Yes, it is.
She died shortly after that.
Right.
What did she die?
Right.
Oh,
Say 1970, something like that. When the album came out, the Mothers of Invention did a short promotion tour, and that's where he met Adelaide Gale Slocum. Now, Gale, his wife for the rest of his life. That he said he fell in love with her in like 10 minutes. Okay.
Wow.
I think he tossed out the other chick and brought her in 1967, and they would remain together for the rest of Frank's life.
Well, the lady you referenced
Is
she was known as she was a cream cheese.
That's right. That's right. I got that little cream cheese, Susie cream cheese. So they had a thing.
Yes.
Right. They were living together, and then but he meets Gail and he gives her a boot.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he wanted. I've read that he said when he saw Gail, like you said, he fell head over heels for her. He said he knew he wanted to have children with this woman.
Yeah. And he had
Basically
four.
What he said.
And he had four. He had 4 kids.
Yeah, they had a bunch.
Yeah. Now Tom Wilson in 1967 would be used kind of nominally as producer for the second album. It was called Absolutely Free, and in reality, Frank was doing a lot of the producing at that point. Okay, that was another takeover that Frank kind of did. The album was recorded starting in November of '66 and was later mixed in New York City as the band began a successful run at the Garrick Theater on Bleecker Street. Absolutely Free is a satirical album. Okay, the beginning of that, most of his albums are.
Yeah.
Okay. And Zappa said that they satirize everything. You know, tracks like Plastic People, Brown Shoes Don't Make It. They all contain lyrics making fun of American society.
Vegetable.
And yeah, and he made fun of hippies as well. Okay? The whole whole counterculture. He made fun of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
He always said that. Well, later he said.
Every vegetable.
Yeah, it's a great tune. It's an 7/8. It's a great tune.
Yeah.
But he always said, he says he looked at the hippie generation from afar.
Yeah.
He goes, I like what they were doing, what they were trying, but I didn't respect them.
Because a lot of them were phony.
Exactly.
You know, a lot of them were rich kids just rebelling against their
Who
parents.
needs the Peace Corps?
Wow.
I mean, if you've ever heard that song,
Yeah, I've heard it.
he just rips them a new one.
Oh yeah. And it's like, oh, I like my hair now. He's like, making fun of his
Oh, my hair looks good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At the time, Zappa was working on a side project, and it was an album of orchestral works, kind of in the vein of John Cage, who was very popular at the time, and it's called Lumpy Gravy. Now, it was recorded by Capitol Records. He actually went over to Capitol, and that became a problem because contractually he was with MGM. Okay, so the album came out on Capitol, but then a lawsuit ensued. MGM sued Capitol. They pulled it from the stores. All right, but it would get settled like a year later, and it would actually come out on Verve. Even though they recorded it for
I don't have that one, but I've heard it.
I've heard it. It's the beginning of his orchestral works. You know, he was really a lot of instrumental and stuff like that. In late '66, while working on Absolutely Free, the Mothers of Invention were offered a contract at the Garrick Theater, and that was in the West Village on Bleecker Street. They would play there for most of '67, and they would also do a quick European tour during that time. And these were just known as like the most off-the-wall, unique performances ever. At that point, there was nothing like this band that existed. Many sections of the show were just straight up improvisation. Okay, Dadaist. Okay, right. Yeah, the giraffe. Right. Audience participation happened a lot. Okay, he would bring people up on stage, and one night he brought several Marines who were actually in uniform up on stage. They brought out a large baby doll. Now, this is during the Vietnam War, right? A large baby doll, and Zappa told them to pretend it was a gook baby and rip it apart.
Oh my God!
And they did.
But Zappa said, he said, but when we were done with this piece, he says, I looked out, and he said, there was a black cat who just returned from Vietnam, crying.
Did he hurt his feelings, or they upset him?
I guess maybe he triggered something in this gentleman.
Tough times, man. That was, a lot of guys were ruined by that.
Well, you know, Zappa's brother Todd, he was a Marine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he was busted on that.
Yeah. Now, the Mothers of Invention were quickly being known at this point as like avant-garde, anti-establishment as well. Zappa had devised on stage when he would play a system of like hand signals and things like that. It was incredible. What he also did was he had a system of sampling music.
Yeah.
All right, and he had radio tape recordings that would, you'd hear it during the show, a sound effect of some kind. He also incorporated his own philosophical and political ideas into all the music. Now, a Mothers of Invention show was considered by many as the height of freedom of expression. Many people said that. And that was what Zappa was actually trying to do. And again, getting back, I said it before, is he really was a champion of that. The people that were trying to express themselves, free speech, freedom of expression, that was what Zappa was about. Because the music was all over the place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the music was all over that fucking place.
And it would only get even more out there as he got older. During the New York City series of shows that he did at the Garrick, they began working on a third album, which was considered by Zappa fans to be the best from his 1960s time. It's called We're Only In It For The Money. Zappa got production credit, with Tom Wilson getting an executive producer credit.
Wow.
But the album is a total satire on hippies and flower power. And, and that was like when it was at its peak. So he was like shitting on it when they were like the most popular. The album cover is a spoof on Sgt. Pepper.
Okay. Do you know about that, though?
Yeah, tell us.
He called Paul McCartney and said, "Look, I would like to see, And Paul McCartney said to him, he says, "Well, you have to talk to my manager." And Frank said, "But you're the artist. You created this. You have control." He's like, "No, you have to." EMI back in those days, which was Abbey Road.
Yeah.
When they owned an artist, they owned an artist. Yeah. Lock, stock, and barrel. So Frank was just like, "Okay, let's come to a compromise." They said, then EMI got back to this. You can do it, but you have to put it on the inside. Like you can't have
that can't be the cover. But
what do you mean the inside?
No, the cover. If you look at the album, the cover is him and the band members.
Is it a gatefold that opens
yes.
up? Yeah.
And when you open the record, that picture where it says the mothers and
with the drum and everything,
that was on the
better.
inside. But the cover of the album is just the band members dressed in drag.
Yeah, that's right.
Dresses.
That's right. Yeah. They wouldn't let them spoof it on the album.
Right.
It had to be on the inside.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. It's always been released that way because I can remember seeing it like that's the cover.
Well,
maybe in re-releases.
Yeah, re-releases. I'm sure he's got the clearance now, but originally
he couldn't get it.
No. And Freak Out was the first double fold-out album with lyrics ever.
Actually, Bob Dylan did it too.
Oh, he did?
Bob Dylan did it around the same time.
Okay.
But Freak Out's the second double album ever released like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a debut album if you think about it.
Yeah, he's got the audacity.
The audacity to do a double album.
Four-sided album.
Yeah. So there was also one thing they used on that album is the tape loops that were very, stuff that the Beatles have worked on Revolver, like on Tomorrow Never Knows, like those tape loop sounds, stuff that he brought that all over that album. Okay. Zappa's new acquaintance at the time was a person named Cal Schenkel, who he met in New York, and Cal would do the artwork on that, and he would do the artwork on a bunch of other albums going forward. They were friends for a long time. The album is about as offbeat as you can get at that time. It's almost funny with tracks like Who Needs the Peace Corps, like you mentioned, and What's the Ugliest Part of Your Body? The brain. Absolutely free and flower punk are standouts.
Great song.
As much as We're Only In It For The Money it was an eclectic approach to an album. The next one would be totally different and off the wall. Okay. It's called it was released in 1968. It's called Cruising with Reuben and the Jets. And this is one of my favorite Zappa albums, okay, that I've liked for years, okay? But no one knew what to make of this album because it's all doo-wop. But it's doo-wop filtered through, his sense of humor, all right, his warmer fucking mindset.
It says on the album cover, it says, "Is this the Mothers of Invention's last pitch to get their crummy music on the radio?" It actually says that on the cover.
And it actually did get on the radio, okay? Whereas the other stuff, radio didn't touch it. Most people couldn't figure it out. Is this like a serious doo-wop album? Or is it like making fun of doo-wop? No one knew.
No,
No one knew what it was. But Zappa brings a good point. Let me have work on my lumpy gravy here for a second.
Yeah,
lumpy gravy. This is my second vodka soda. By the time I'm done with this, I'm gonna be lumpy gravy.
Oh, you will be lumpy gravy. The way to make drinks,
Yep. This is like this much vodka and that much soda.
Molly pours good.
Molly pours very good. He explained it well when he was asked about the album. He says it was conceived in the way that Stravinsky compositions would take classical music and pervert it. All right. So why not do that to doo-wop? Makes sense, right?
And Hugo Stravinsky's one of his favorites.
Yeah, and the album, like I said, it would get some radio airplay due to the doo-wop sound of it. It was actually, played a little bit. But during this very prolific time in his music, Zappa was developing the business side of his career as well. He started something called Bizarre Records and Straight Records. And he started that with manager Herb Cohen. He was going to sign bands and big stuff on those labels.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers would be distributing the albums. And he signed right away Alice Cooper. Okay. He signed Captain Beefheart. All right. Beefheart would make Trout Mask Replica.
Great album.
I believe it was on the straight record or Bizarre. I think it was on straight. Okay. And Frank produced that. Go back to our Captain Beefheart episode. We go into all that a lot.
The Captain Beefheart.
That was a great show. He also produced Lenny Bruce's last comedy album on Zappa's label before he passed away. In 1967 and 1968, Zappa appeared on 2 episodes of The Monkees.
Yes.
And one episode had him dressed like Mike Nesmith, and he interviews Mike Nesmith, who's dressed like Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. At the end of it, he smashes a car with a sledgehammer. All right. And at the end of the interview, and he also was in the movie, the Monkees movie called Head. All right.
I've seen it.
Yeah. And he walks with a cow.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's
and he's like leading
bizarre.
a cow. Yeah. And he tells Davy Jones that the youth of America depends on you. So you got to show them the way. It's a great scene. It's a great scene. Let me tell you something. The Monkees movie Head. I first saw it like maybe about 30 years ago, early 90s, and I didn't know what the.
Were you stoned?
Yes, I was
Okay.
stoned. I was living in pre-hipster Williamsburg, which was very similar to Zappa's Chicano neighborhood at that point. Okay, and wasted watching that, and going like, they're writing psychedelically, like the Porpoise song and stuff like that. I love it. I love that movie. Okay.
The movie Head.
The movie Head. And that was all to show that the Monkees could write their own shit.
You know what the funny thing about that movie? I always thought it was a goof on the Beatles movie Help.
Oh, the
The Beatles movie Help.
Oh.
I always thought it was a spoof on Beatle movie.
It
The
is.
Monkey movie.
It is kind of. Yeah, I think what had happened is Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones were always criticized for not writing their own shit. But the truth is that the Monkees were pretty fucking talented.
Yeah.
They could play great. All right, they didn't write that, Daydream Believer and all that. They're fucking Neil Diamond with that.
Yep.
Okay, but
It's still good.
they were still good, and they wrote that whole score for that movie. Head. Anyway, I have to see that again. It's
Dude,
been
they
a long time.
actually became good writers like the
They
Monkey,
did.
'cause
They did. Should we do a show on the Monkees?
I've been
We-
telling you
we've
that
flirted
should
with
do-
that
I
idea
think
a
we
couple
should
of
do
times.
one on the Monkees.
Yeah.
Why not?
Now Zappa actually loved the Monkees, all right, and enjoyed what they were doing. He even asked Mickey Dolenz to join the Mothers of Invention.
Wow.
And what happened was Dolenz considered it, but he couldn't get out of his contract with Columbia at the time.
Correct.
All right, so in late '68, the band went on its second European tour, and the first, like I said, was during that New York stay in '67. This time they actually went on German TV. They played France, they played England, they played Denmark, and then when they came back to Los Angeles, Zappa and his wife moved into a house in Laurel Canyon briefly, but then would move again to what would be his permanent residence on Woodrow Wilson Drive in Laurel Canyon, and he lived there for the rest of his life. The log cabin.
Wow.
Yes, he was a log. I don't know, was it totally a log cabin or partially a log cabin?
Part of it was.
Yeah.
You know who bought it?
The family's not there no more?
No.
Who?
Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga bought Frank
Zappa's house.
Hey guys,
That's the only fucking thing.
So the whole movie Head,
yeah,
it's on YouTube for free.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I just found out. Put it
I'm
on.
gonna watch it tonight. I'm gonna watch it tonight. I'm gonna pop it edible.
It's about an hour and 25 minutes.
Yeah, it's like an hour and a half. It's not long. It's not long.
Anybody have any LSD 25? Mushrooms?
Yeah. Now,
Then we can become the man that stay on goats.
That's
Yeah.
right. Man.
we haven't talked about that in a while. In late '68, the band went on its second European tour, which I'm getting lumped up when I already said that. Now, the Motels of Invention were not doing well financially at this point, okay? And despite they had some popularity in Europe, American fans were just not dead yet. I mean, they had their hardcore fans. They did. Yeah. Following.
They were mad at Frank because he was getting a lot of producing deals at the time.
Yes.
But you know, he was a great producer.
Wanted him to produce Crown of Creation, which came out in '68. He produced 2 songs that were never put
On the album.
on the re-release.
Now, do you think like, okay, that was the album where David Crosby gave them the song about the threesome?
Right.
I can't remember the name of it, but
There's a song on there.
Yeah.
On the re-release of Crown of Creation that they produced.
It didn't make the album
It
original.
was called "Would You Like a Snack?" And it was about a guy going down on a chick during that time.
I could picture Grace like singing.
And Frank's
picture
like, "Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
I'll do it."
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Now, the problem too with the Modes of Invention is the live shows were very different than the actual studio compositions.
Correct.
He kind of had like his studio versions of songs that everybody would listen to at home on the records.
Yeah.
And then when you go see them, they sounded totally different. They had
Like a
different
reggae
arrangements.
Yeah.
You might do like a reggae version of a fucking song. You know,
Okay, why not?
and that used to confuse a lot of people. Okay, so Zappa felt that what he called his electrical chamber music
Yes.
was not appreciated. Okay, so some changes had to be made, and in '69 there were actually 9 members in the band.
That's a
And
that's
Zappa,
a big fucking
it was a
band.
big band. Zappa supported them individually.
Yeah.
Okay, even when they weren't touring,
Yeah.
he was paying them. Okay, and they depended on him for that.
But he was making money. He was making money.
Well, what he did was he had his publishing rights from some of the film scores he did and things like that, and he would pay them with that.
Yeah.
Okay, MGM Verve were becoming a problem too. Okay, they were becoming very intrusive in his creative process, and he didn't like that. Frank ended up leaving MGM that year for Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers subsidiary Reprise Records.
Yeah. Which
And
was started by
Frank Sinatra. That was Frank Sinatra's
He
label.
broke up with his band.
Yeah. The Mothers of not quite yet. It's coming. But Mothers of Invention, the Zappa albums would then kind of they would be under the Bizarre label, and released by Reprise.
Right.
For a short time.
That's where you can get paid.
Now, can you picture like Sinatra being like, "Would we sign?"
Frank
Who's
Zappa.
this fucking
Who's this
weirdo?
guy?
Oh, that guy, yeah,
That guy?
I saw him at the whiskey back in '60.
Cool, baby.
Yeah. He wrote a great song for me.
Yeah. And you know that Zappa likes Sinatra.
Oh, yeah.
He likes Sinatra. He did. Now, unfortunately, by '69, Zappa would break up the band, and it was really over financial issues that it came to a head like that. But he also felt that some of the members weren't putting in 100%.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
can see that.
The rest of the band kind of accused him of being a tyrant.
Which
All right, which he was.
He was
And he was,
perfectionist.
and I was going to say, perfectionist.
Still
He
paying
was.
them.
I think he had OCD of some sort.
But he was still paying them.
And he was paying him, but now that he just got off the bill ticket.
Yeah.
Well, the thing was, too, he didn't do drugs.
No.
So he didn't want anybody else in the band.
Yeah, doing drugs.
And they were all at least smoking weed. If
Yeah,
not other things.
they had to look at it if they wanted to smoke a joint because Frank would be like,
And he didn't want his money going to that or whatever.
You know what's the other thing that was he worked with another guy that was a professional, like Beefheart was a fucking professional too. Like,
That's why they could only
That's
why they only briefly collaborated.
Yeah,
they drove each other.
They probably drove each other crazy.
Yeah, because you got two guys going, oh, this is what I
want.
But
one thing that Frank used to do, and for whatever reason, he would never stay in the same hotel as the band.
Okay.
And when you do that, it kind of starts to look like, oh, what are you, above me?
He wanted to bang groupies, but he didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah, he was doing his own thing.
Yeah.
He was a very private guy. Okay, banging 3 at a time.
You were getting coffee enemies to these chicks. We know it.
No, he drank
Mud Shark.
He drank Mud Shark. He drank 50 cups of coffee a day. Frank Zappa.
He should have never died of cancer then. Coffee
it's supposed to not give you the
coffee is one
eternal
of
Winstons, one after another.
Right. Winston's. God. I remember Winston's on the dashboard of my father's car. Either that or Viceroy's. One or the other. Okay. I'm dating myself here. Now, the material recorded during this period would come out in 1970. 2 albums, one called Dweezil's Rip My Flesh, and another album with probably one of the best names ever, Burnt Weenie Sandwich.
Yeah. He got a fun fact.
Okay.
He said, why did you call it that? He says, because that's my favorite sandwich. He goes, I live in a house with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So all I can get is a hot dog, throw it in a frying pan, burn it, and eat it.
Real quick.
Sandwich.
Real quick. Everybody's around.
Exactly.
I like a weenie when it's burnt like that. You know? Did I just come out? After the band was over, Zappa released his critically acclaimed solo album called Hot Lights. Now, it's mostly an instrumental album, and it featured the classic Peaches and Regalia. It was an album of free jazz, blues, and long guitar jams.
Wow.
Now, a variety of musicians played on it. A lot of people love this album. They say it's their favorite. Who you had was violinist Don Sugarcane Harris and Shuggie Otis, who wrote the original Strawberry Letter 23, okay, which is on the Juke here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you also had Mothers of Invention member Ian Underwood in the band. Would play drums and a variety of other
he was multi-talented.
Yeah, he could play the clarinet, other wind instruments. The only track on that album with lyrics, because it's all instrumental except one song, is a great track called Willie the Pimp.
Willie the Pimp.
And the vocals were done by the one and only Captain B-Funk. The album bombed in America, but it was a big hit in England. Went top 20. They loved them in England.
They're more mental than England. They like
it's always like that.
Things that fail here go over there. You become
How many times?
Yeah, every time. Yeah, every time.
His shows in Europe are always sold out.
He would play big halls.
Yeah. Milan, 82, but that's.
Well, that's later, but still, he was huge. Even
the soccer field in Milan, Italy.
He also did some. The Mothers of Invention did some festivals where they played, I think, in front of like almost 500,000 people. Right?
There's some later on. No, there's some footage on YouTube of them playing in Montreux, Switzerland.
Yeah.
Zappa's running like the plaid green, and they're playing like on it, and like they pan around and it's like Sweden's
do you remember what happened to him with the Royal Albert Hall? They canceled a thing.
We're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into that. Yeah, we're gonna get into that whole thing because that was a mess. In '70, Zappa met classical conductor Zubin Mehta. The two of them organized a plan to have the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra that Mehta worked for play with a rock band, which was going to be Zappa.
Yep.
Okay. It was going to be in May of that year. The music that Zappa had written for this was done in motel rooms. Okay, which is where you get the movie 200 Motels.
Yeah.
Okay. They had figured that in the Mothers of Invention, with all their touring, that they had actually been in 200 motels, which is how they came up with this. Yeah. Now the concert itself, Zappa felt was kind of subpar. This orchestral thing.
Yeah.
Okay. He would do concerts with orchestras several more times in his career, but he always complained that the orchestras didn't perform well enough with him. Okay. For some reason, he just was never satisfied with it. But it was very popular. You had this, like, you know, popular classical conductor, Zubin Mehta, with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, doing Zappa songs. And they were all into it. Okay. So later, in 70, Zappa reformed the Mothers of Invention. Now, usually, he just called the band from the Mothers from that point on. Of Invention when it dropped off. But this new lineup, it included British drummer Ainsley Dunbar, jazz keyboardist George Duke, okay, Ian Underwood was back, Jeff Simmons on bass and rhythm guitar, and 3 members of the rock band The Turtles. Okay, you had bass player Jim Capone and singers Mark Bowman and Howard Cameron. Flo and Eddie. The phosphorescent leech shorted down to Flo and Eddie. All right. Now that was because they had contractual problems. They couldn't even change the Turtles. And you know what's funny is the Turtles were like the biggest pop band
they were
in the world at that point. And 2 of them, you know, the main vocalists were now joining fucking Zappa.
Yeah.
All right. And they couldn't use the name, so they made it Flo and Eddie. This version of the Mothers debuted on Frank Zappa's solo album called Chunga's Revenge. And I had never heard this album until I started doing the research on this show. I think it's fucking
Transylvania Boogie.
Yeah. I knew that. I didn't know any of the other songs. That was the only one I know. Okay. And it's an eclectic mix of songs like everything he does. But it was different than Hot Rats, the previous solo album, which was mostly free jazz or just guitar jams. Here you had some poppy-ish songs on there. Okay, like Tell Me You Love Me, okay, was one. And Would You Go All the Way? I've asked that many times. Some tracks like the title track, Chunga's Revenge, were totally improvised. They were just improvisations through and through. And it was also a percussion-only track called The Clap. Which was the prelude to Does It Hurt When You Pee?
I got it from the toilet seat.
That's right. Now, Zappa's next project was a big one. Okay, it was the film 200 Motels. It was meant to be a surrealistic kind of documentary, but it was about a rock band life on the road, basically. And kind of like pre-Spinal Tap. Right. It's mostly trippy as hell. Okay, and it's all unconnected. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But one thing they did was they actually shot it on videotape. The first movie to ever be shot on video and transferred to 35 millimeters.
It was shot. A lot of it was shot in England.
In England, right? Or when they were touring
with studios or something.
But I think they were on tour or something too. They were doing it while they were in the middle of that.
It is a
there's a lot of like double and triple exposures of the film, which gives it a trippy kind of look. There's a lot of sound effects and funny noises. The score relied on an extensive amount of orchestral music. People didn't know what to make of that. All right, and Zappa was having issues with the classical musical world at that point, especially when a Royal Albert Hall concert was canceled because a representative of the venue thought that some of Zappa's music was offensive. Right? And they canceled it. You know, they were recording for the movie, and the conductor was like, "Well, we're not doing this. It's offensive." Okay.
Have you seen the tape?
Yeah. And you know, he would actually sue the Royal Albert Hall for canceling, but he would lose that in court. Ringo Starr and Keith Moon and the famous actor Theodore Bickford are in that movie. Okay. I mean, anything with Keith Moon in it, you gotta fucking watch. Right? You know. People didn't know what to make of it at the time, but it's since become a cult classic. I saw it one time at the 8th Street Theater years ago.
Now, I skipped it on time.
Yeah, how are we? Well, listen, man, we got a lot of it. After 200 Motels, Zappa and the Mothers went on tour, releasing 2 live albums. Just one was called Live at the Fillmore East in June of '71, and Just Another Band from LA, which featured the 20-minute rock opus that satirizes a rock opera called Billy Was a Mountain. All right.
Wow.
This song was theatrically done. There would be things on stage going on.
Yes.
And they would also talk about like sexual situations the band members got into.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a crazy fucking song. Now, in December 4th, 1971, Zappa would offer, he would go through like his first of a couple of setbacks. While performing in Switzerland at the Casino di Montreux, right, the band's equipment was destroyed when a flare was set off by an audience member starting a fire and burned the casino down. Okay? Now, that event is actually immortalized forever with the song Smoke on the Water. Because they talk about seeing flag on it. Yep. In the lyrics. And the reason that is because Deep Purple, who did Smoke on the Water, was supposed to record in that studio the next day. And then, the Zappa show was going to be the end of the season for the casino, and it was going to close. But they had a fire, and then they couldn't record what they needed to record. The band lost $50,000 worth of equipment, which in those days was a lot of money. All right.
Their next $300,000
easily. Now, the next gig they had lined up was at the Rainbow Theatre in the UK, in London. They had to rent all their gear, but this was another big setback right here. During the encore of the gig at the Rainbow, an audience member who was jealous, it was a guy, he was jealous of his girlfriend's infatuation with Frank Zappa, got on stage and shoved Zappa into the orchestra pit, which was a huge drop off the stage. Okay, and it was a concrete pit. All right, so the band thought he was dead. All right, when they looked at him, because he was out when he fell. But he suffered, this is in the middle of the show, he suffered fractures all over his body. He had head trauma. He had injuries to both his legs, his neck, and he had a crushed larynx. Now, when it healed, his larynx healed, his voice had changed. It had gone down like a couple of octaves. All right. Zappa had to take a year and a half off.
He was in a wheelchair.
Recover. Yeah, he was in a wheelchair for part of the time. He would return to the stage again in September of '72, but he was wearing a leg brace, and the way his legs healed is like one leg ended up being shorter than the other.
Yes.
So he kind of had a limp for the rest of his life.
He made one of his greatest jazz albums during that period.
Right, and that's what's amazing is he didn't stop recording during that time. He just couldn't talk. Okay. What happened was he had lyrics later on, the song "Zombie Wolf" and "Dancing Fool," like he mentioned his leg being messed up. But the fall had given him a limp and chronic back pain that he would consistently have to live with. But during that time, the Mothers of Invention band would kind of be done, because they, Flo and Eddie had to like break off on their own to continue getting paid, so they went off and they did their own thing.
Right.
During his recovery in '71, '72, he released 2 jazz records. Okay, one called Waka Jawaka,
Great album.
right, and then one called The Great Wazoo. I'm sorry, Grand Wazoo. My mistake. The lyrics, the words are getting a little blurry here. My lumpy gravy trick is kicking. My lumpy gravy trick is kicking in. They're similar to Hot Rats in a way. Okay. Put it on my tab. Yeah, give me another.
What was it?
Yeah. All right.
I'm good right now.
When he returned to live performances again in September, he had a 20-piece band at that point, big band called the Grand Wazoo, like the album. Now later on, he would bring a scaled-down version of this called the Petite Wazoo for a U.S. tour from October to end of December of '72.
The Petite Wazoo was only 20.
It was only 10. It was only 10. The Grand was 20. By '73, Bizarre and Straight Records were discontinued. Zappa and manager Herb Cohen started Discreet Records at that point, which was distributed by Warner Brothers. But through that year, he had formed and toured with smaller groups, often using the Mothers title again.
Yes.
Okay. So you had different versions of the Mothers still going on. But a new album called Overnight Sensation, one of my favorites, was recorded through March and June of that year. Released in September, Overnight Sensation included the live show favorite Dynamo Hum and Montana. On the tracks, In the Slime, Dirty Love, Zombie Wolf, Dynamo Hum, and Montana, Zappa wanted to use backup singers. So what he did was he contacted Ike and Tina Turner about using Tina and the Ikettes,
Yes.
okay, which is great. And they showed up, and Ike had, being dick that he is, okay, told them, don't pay the Ikettes more than $25 for this.
Right, yeah.
So he said, he was like, what? You know, so he said, fuck that. And when it turned out, they ended up getting paid $25 an hour instead of $25.
Do you know the other part of that story, though?
Well, I'm getting to it. Okay. Now, Frank, paid him $25 an hour, but Tina Turner brought Ike in to see the progress of what was going on. The parts that from Montana and Dynamo Home were a little difficult for the Ikettes, and it took them a couple of days to learn it. But when they got it down, she brought Ike into the recording studio, and he looked at everything. He's like, "What is this shit?" He didn't understand. He had no clue. Okay, and he left the studio. All right, and it turned out that he didn't even want the Ikettes to get a credit written on the album. Okay, I think they do though.
They do.
I think they do. Or you're gonna add on
the weird thing was, though, there's a photo of Frank handing Tina the check for that session in the Ikettes. And Ike lets them take the picture.
Yeah.
And he yanks it, puts it, and leaves. And
Wow.
he probably blew it on coke.
Probably,
He's
yeah.
such a class act.
You know, he was such a dick.
He was.
He
That's
was
what
a
I
dick.
meant.
Yeah, I mean, a musical genius, but a
Yeah.
dick, you know.
You know, he beat Tina to death, right?
Probably
Not to
damn-
death.
He died first.
He beat him to death. Yeah, he died first.
Salute.
That was a good one. That was a good one, Rob. Who'd you steal that from?
Oh, it was a headline in the New York Post. It say, Ike beat Tina to death.
Yeah, he died first.
He died first. You don't remember that?
one, no.
It's almost like the one that it was. They had a great
That's a
one.
break for the guest here, but we're gonna keep going.
Yeah,
go
we're in
ahead.
time
Go
for breaks
ahead.
here.
The Post had another great Hillary Finger intern. You remember that?
Yes, that I remember. That I
So the
remember.
Post always come with great headlines.
Okay, so getting back to this, the thing about overnight sensation that's interesting is that it would be Frank at that same time would be recording his biggest American hit album called Apostrophe. He was doing it as a side project. That was released in March of '74 as a Frank Zappa solo album.
Yeah.
The album is strong on Zappa's humor and bizarre lyrical themes as usual. It had the song "Don't Eat the Yellow Snow," which
that's a great song.
everybody loves. That got to number 86 on the Billboard charts. It was his biggest single.
He had a love affair like with Ian Underwood. He was always with him, right?
Well, yeah. Underwood played with him for a long. He was great.
Like he just followed his direction, or because if you hear the history, like
He could play his compositions. Not everybody could.
Yeah, so I guess
You know,
that's why.
Underwood was he's still alive, very talented guy.
Because I keep looking at him, and he's like in every Zappa. He
Yeah.
was even in with Bickford, right? He built
Yep.
Bickford. But then at one point, Bickford, like his band went, and it was actually Frank Zappa and somebody else out.
Well, you're talking about the Bongo Fury.
Yeah, Bongo
Yeah,
Fury.
yeah. We're almost at that point.
Yeah.
Now, the title track "Apostrophe" is an instrumental track featuring ex-Cream bass player and singer Jack Bruce.
Yep.
Jim Gordon on drums.
And Jim Gordon was on drums. But Jack, I don't think he understood Zappa too much. He brought him in. He asked him to come in and play, and he just told Bruce, he's like, make just this sound like wah, you know, and he did, and that was like his contribution to it. But he actually, like on the album, it says like he wrote this and that, but he really didn't. There's one cello part on a track that he wrote, but because a lot of people don't know, Jack Bruce could actually play the cello. A lot of people didn't know that. 2 more albums featuring the Mothers will be released at this time. The live album called Roxy and Elsewhere in '74, and One Size Fits All in '75.
He had a hell of a library of the Mothers, because even though they were
Even when it was open, he would call bands the Mothers sometimes when it wasn't.
Had like one person on it or whatever.
Yeah, I guess it was a way just constantly release things.
And these are all
Not
coming
just
out
Zappa.
discrete records, right? This is all on discrete records, right?
Yeah.
He just moving from label to label the way it looks.
Well, Discreet was his label.
Yeah.
Okay, and he was being put out by Warner
But
Brothers.
wasn't Bizarre his label also?
He ended that at this point. Bizarre and Straight records. Bizarre and Straight, two different labels. In '75, Zappa released Bongo Fury. You just mentioned that.
Bongo Fury.
And that would be the final Mother's material that he would use. It's part live, part studio. It was recorded in various locations in '75. The album featured his old friend Captain Bickford in his only tour as a member of the band. He sings and plays harmonica on several tracks. One called Sam with the showing scalp flat top, and Man with the Woman Head. Okay, Terry Bozzio would begin playing drums with him, and that would last until about 1978. You guys remember Terry Bozzio from Missing Persons? Yeah, the new wave band. He started that band with Dale Bozzio, his hustler pinup wife at that point. Some legal troubles happened in '76 though. Him and manager Herb Cohen parted ways, and Cohen was accused of skimming off the top at Discreet Records. He was stealing, as well as signing bands that Zappa didn't approve of. What happened was when this lawsuit went down, he sued Cohen. Cohen sued him back. It froze all the assets, froze all the recordings. He couldn't release anything. Everything was jammed up. He basically was prevented from releasing anything before that.
But he produced Grand Funk's album that year.
Yes. Yeah. We're going to talk about that next week when we do Grand Funk. All right?
Okay.
Yes. Zappa had begun work on the rock-oriented album Zoot Allures.
Yes.
It was his 22nd album at that point, okay? And he released it directly through Warner Brothers because he couldn't use the other label. He was tied up with Discreet.
Right.
Now, the album came out in October of '76. It was part live, part studio again. Some of the live tracks were as old as '72 and '73. Originally, it was planned as a double album, but he had to kind of like pare it down to a single album. One track on that called Black Napkins would become a fan favorite from that point on.
So he had an easy way of going. So he must have been so good, but he had an easy way of going from label to label and recording shit in other places. Which most artists couldn't do that, but
he was very well. He was very smart. He knew the business, and he said, "Okay, if I can't release this on Discreet because I'm jammed up with legal trouble, can we put this out on Warner Bros.?" He made money for them.
Yeah,
right. He didn't make a lot, but it was a consistent amount coming in. And if you make money for the label, they'll bend over backwards.
Yeah.
At least in those days.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well.
It's different now. Now, around this time in the mid-'70s, Zappa was preparing material for a project called Leather.
Yeah.
It's actually spelled L-A-T-H-E-R.
Leather.
With the little dots on top of the A, the German dots. It was supposed to be a 4 LP set of albums encompassing all his styles, everything from free jazz to rock. But Warner Brothers pushed back on this. They said, we're not coming out with a quadruple album for you, all right, which is very expensive.
It's the height of disco, too.
Yeah, right.
They didn't know how to market it.
They didn't know how to market something like that. Zappa, they refused to release it, all right? Zappa retaliated by signing an agreement with a small label called Phonogram Inc., and some test pressings were made of the LPs. All right.
Actually, what he did, he went on an LA radio station.
I was going to talk about that.
Right.
Why don't you jump back in here?
All right.
Yeah.
What's it?
Rodney on the Rock. Maybe it was Rodney on the Rock. I think it was before
He
Rodney.
screwed Warner Brothers really good with this one.
Yeah.
But,
So
yeah,
he ended up pressing the records on Phonogram. All right. Now then they retaliated again with litigation to stop its release. Zappa was not going to be outdone. Okay, so he went on KROQ, which is a station in Los Angeles, and allowed them to broadcast the whole Leather album. Okay, and he was telling everybody to just tape it off the radio.
Yeah, that's
he said
it.
Warner Brothers doesn't own the rights to
At
this.
that point, Warner Brothers sued him directly, all right, and wouldn't release any Zappa material for over a year. Eventually, much of this material would come out, okay? Some of it without his permission, bootleg, Okay, and for instance, Studio 10, Sleep Dirt, orchestral favorites between 78 and 79 were all stuff that would have been on leather.
Right.
Okay. In 1996, a few years after his death, the full leather album would be released as for Ryko Records. Right.
I'm going to take over for a bit in the bar. I'll be back, so you guys continue. Once
Sure.
everything's over, move.
All right. You got to stop bartending?
Yeah.
All right. Are we? What time is it?
3 o'clock.
Wow.
We've been here since 1:30.
Long show.
Yeah.
Slide over a little bit, man. All right. So me and Dan are going to do the rest of the show here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll come back.
We'll come back.
You got any nachos?
All right. During this period in the late 70s, with litigation between Warner Brothers, MGM, his manager Cohen, and Zappa, the only real income he had was from touring.
Yep.
So drummer Terry Bozzio would become a regular. Original Mothers of Invention bassist Roy Estrada rejoined up. And in December of 76, Frank was asked to host Saturday Night Live.
Once.
The one
Yeah.
time, right? Well, he did
That's
it
it.
twice, right?
No, he only did it once.
One time, right? He was banned after
He was
that.
banned,
Yeah,
yes.
right. He basically performed the song "I Am the Slime" with NBC announcer Don Pardo, announcing him. He also performed "Peaches and Regalia," and he acted in a couple of sketches with John Belushi. There was the samurai thing that he did.
Right.
Right. Now, why was he banned?
From what they didn't like his, when he came out to do the monologue, the opening thing.
Yeah.
He was just very serious. Like, he wouldn't joke around. He didn't, in the sketches that
Did he have a script that he was following?
he didn't like the script.
Oh, so he
He
did his
wanted
own
to
thing.
improvise.
He did his own thing.
And, the people at NBC, Dick Ebersol, I think that was his name at the time.
Yeah.
He was like, that's it, And there's actually a show called SNL, and people who were banned, and he's like number 5.
Wow. Well, that would actually stand for the rest of his life, right?
On the slime, the song is about TV.
Yeah.
And it's negative effects.
Negative effects.
I'm the slime oozing from your TV set.
Right. All the crap.
Yet?
And I was listening to that the other day in preparation for this show, and it got to me. I'm listening to it, and I'm like, this is about now. He was talking about TV, but I'm like, this could be related to all the crap that we hear on the internet and everything now. It's even worse. Could you imagine Zappa if he was alive now?
He wouldn't stand for it.
He wouldn't stand for any of this.
He would be 80 years old this year.
Yeah.
I don't see him backing down.
No.
He'd be like this bitter old man. Well, I mean, people said he was bitter when he was 35.
Well, he was like that, but look, I mean, he was a voice for freedom of expression, which is something. I don't mean to get off topic. We're going to get back to the show, but something that we're living with today, where freedom of expression. I want to get a little bit more. Man.
Yeah.
Freedom of expression, is something that is at risk right now. Okay.
Correct.
Guys like Zappa, in those days, he had free reign. He was controversial. He got in trouble sometimes, but he basically spoke his mind, did the music he wanted to do. I respect that. Politically incorrect, I respect that too.
Yeah.
Today, he would not fly.
No.
Some of his lyrics, there was just no way you were going to get away with that today. He would have, maybe.
He had a way.
He put it out himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He just had a way of looking at things outside the box. Like, he didn't want to be anywhere near the box. He wanted to be outside and go, you follow that, I'm going to do my thing. And he did.
Right. So Zappa, while in New York at that point, for Saturday Night Live, he cut a live album called Zappa in New York, which had material from Leather on it. It included a bunch of complex instrumentals, a song called The Black Page, a funny track called Titties and Beer.
Titties and Beer.
Gotta love that. There was also a controversial track called The Illinois Enema Bandit.
Illinois Enema Bandit.
Which was about sex criminal Michael Kenyon. Now, critics brought a lot of issue to this.
That's the one on stage that Don Pardo
does the voiceover.
Yes.
Right, he does the voiceover. All right, and you know, people have problems with the sexual references in it, but Zappa would respond by saying, "What do you make of a society that is so primitive that it clings to the belief that certain words in its language are so powerful that they would corrupt you the moment you hear them?" It's a great quote. All right. Yeah. I mean, you know, sticks and stones, man. You know, it's like.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Oh, well, that too. But sticks and stones, just words. Just words. Exactly. They're gonna corrupt you.
Words only have power if you let them.
If you give them power.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah. Now, this would be a belief that he would take to the censorship fight. He would have many years later with the PMRC. We'll talk about that a little bit. Zappa ended the 70s, resolving some of his lawsuits successfully. He also released two of his most popular albums in '79. I love both these albums: Shake Your Booty and Joe's Garage. Now, Shake Your Booty was spelled shake, S-H-E-I-K, like a sheep, and then Your Booty, Y-E-R-B-O-U-T-I.
He had one of his top 10 hits on it,
Dancing Fool. Okay. Now, Shake Your Booty was the first release at that time in that year, and it was on his newly formed label called Zappa Records. It was distributed by Phonogram, and it's made up mostly of kind of live material recorded in '77 and '78. It's a mix.
It's what he called xenochrony. It was taking a drum track from '73, a bass line from '74, and mashing it together
In the studio.
He was the master of that.
Yeah. You would think it was all one set.
Exactly.
Okay, but it wasn't. It was different things, and that was intentional. The album, which is actually fucking hilarious. It was satirical and everything else. It also poked fun at disco.
Yep.
Okay. It poked fun at Bob Dylan. There's that one track where the guy is singing like Bob Dylan.
Yep.
Okay. And obviously, Shake Your Booty was a shot at Casey and the Sunshine. Okay.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Now, there's even a track called Jewish Princess, which became a problem. The Anti-Defamation League got on his case about this.
But I Griff didn't like it either.
Yeah. And they actually demanded an apology from him, which he refused.
He said no.
Okay, he said no. And when he was referring to Jewish princesses, he said, unlike the unicorn, such creatures do exist and deserve to be commemorated with their own special opus. There you go. All right? So he basically said,
sandblasted. He said sandblasted.
Yeah.
Titanic tits and sandblasted zits. I mean, that was one of the lines.
Yeah. Fingernails and everything.
Yeah.
But it was the track Bobby Brown that we're going to talk about here. All right.
It goes down.
Yep. Bobby Brown Goes Down. All right. And it didn't do anything in the States, but it was a big hit in Europe, particularly in Scandinavia for some reason. Now, the song, it's about a popular and he says cute boy named Bobby Brown, who's kind of living the American dream. He's a popular kid. He meets, he's popular and he's living the dream until he meets a lesbian named Freddie, okay, who's involved with the women's liberation movement at the time.
Yep.
And he kind of, he befriends Freddie and starts to question his own sexuality. He decides to get a leisure suit, and he's going to live his life as a homosexual, but nobody's going to know.
And he can take an hour on the Tower of
And he
Power.
can take an hour on the
As long as he got a little golden shower.
And what does he say about sitting on a spindle?
With a spindle up my butt till it makes me scream. I am the American dream.
Zappa was astonished that the song actually was a hit in Scandinavia, particularly Norway. That he wanted to have an anthropologist go to the country and study why it was actually such a big hit. Okay, but late in '79, he would come out with, I think it's probably his most commercial. You still occasionally will hear the title track on the radio, Joe's Garage. All right. Usually when you hear Zappa on the radio, it is Joe's Garage.
Or Dancing Fool. Or Don't Eat the Yellow Snow. Dr. Demento would play a lot of his
all right. Now you're talking about something. Dr. Demento, probably the first time I ever heard Frank Zappa had to be on Dr.
Yes.
Demento. Okay? Same with the Ramones. First time I ever heard the Ramones was Teenage Lobotomy, on Dr. Demento.
Really?
Yes, like we must have been about 9 years old.
I know you how long now, and I just found this out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you didn't know that? Every weekend, Dr. Demento.
I did like Dr.
I
Demento
listened to that shit religiously.
And I used to watch Uncle Floyd movie too.
There you go. He's 68.
Yep.
Fish heads, rolling, rolling fish heads.
We're gonna get sued.
Yeah, I know. We're singing shit we don't have the license for. All right. Now,
Too many seconds.
Joe's Garage was a triple album, and it featured lead singer Ike Willis kind of doing these narrations in between the songs. All right. It was a rock opera in a way.
Yes.
It talked about the danger of different political systems. It was also kind of inspired by the Iranian Revolution in '79 at the time,
Yes.
because they banned all music, Western music specifically.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and it's kind of like, what's it like in a society like that? It's also about a strange relationship that we Americans, not me, not you, but
Right.
some Americans, okay, have about sexuality and speaking about sex and things like that. They're kind of Puritan, but also perverted shit.
He
that
mentions
goes on.
it in the song called Cruise Slut.
Right.
I mean, that
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
much.
there you go. That pretty much says it. There was kind of a sequel to Jewish Princess called Catholic Girls, where he talks about, Catholic girls in the basement of the rectory. What do
CYO.
what do they do? Yeah,
They're learning to blow.
They're gonna have the crucifix.
right. And then you got the famous Lucille Messed Up My Mind.
Yep.
All right, that's a great one. The title track about playing rock music in the garage.
Don't you boys know any nice music? I'm calling the police.
I'm calling the police. Mom gets mad, right?
Oh yeah.
Now, there's another track on there that's got to be mentioned called, another album, after that. The Watermelon and Easter Egg.
Great song. It's one of the greatest solos.
Wait, that's an album or a song?
It's a song.
It's a song.
But it's on. I think it's on. You Are What You Is.
You Are What You Is, right? The next album.
You is
That's
what
right.
you am. A cow don't
Yeah.
make ham.
Exactly.
The video for that was
So
great.
many Zappa things for me kind of melt together.
Yeah.
Especially after a Lumpy Gravy's.
Probably.
All right. In December 21st, 1979, Zappa's movie Baby Snakes came out. It premiered in New York City. The promo for the movie featured the tagline, "It's a movie about people who do stuff that is not normal."
That sums up Zappa.
That's pretty much
That
sums up
sums him
Zappa.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The movie was 2 hours and 40 minutes of constant footage from New York shows from '77.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Nicky Spatafora
Nicky, yes.
was at the '77 Halloween show.
No shit.
He told me.
All right. Well, Nicky, you voted for Frank Zappa for us to do Zappa, so that's for you, man. Yeah, cool.
He saw him at the Palladium a bunch of times.
I don't remember him telling me that. He told you that. All right, cool.
He might have been high.
Because I was high.
We're getting sued from
Yeah,
everywhere.
We're singing all kinds of shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the movie was, like I said, 2 hours and 40 minutes of concert footage from '77 around Halloween in New York, particularly the Palladium.
Yes.
There's also some clay animation in the movie.
Tom Bickford.
Right, who did it. It didn't do well commercially.
No.
But it did win a French award called the Premier Grand Prix at the first International Musical Festival in Paris in 1981. In 1980, Zappa cut ties with Phonogram after the label refused to release the single "I Don't Want to Get Drafted."
Yep.
He had done some touring. He wanted to put out a single.
Yep.
They wouldn't put it out. Now, much of 1980 he spent on the road,
Yes.
and Zappa wanted to release this single as a response to the Carter administration demanding that everybody register for the draft.
Selective service. Yeah.
Selective service. Now, it wasn't a draft in particular. The draft had been over for about, I think, 5 years or so at that point, 5 or 6. But it was just to be registered in case you had to go. Now, I got a question. I had to do this.
I did it.
Do you still have to do that? You're looking at me, Darren. What?
I actually did put in for the selective service.
When you were 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
If
Do you mind if I ask how many years ago that was? I'm just curious.
So it's 2020. 16 years ago.
Okay, so 16 years ago, you were 18. You had to do that, so they still do it.
If you wanted student loans, federal student loans.
Yeah, to get a government. Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if kids are still doing that.
I have no idea.
Hey, they're spending $200,000 on gender stuff, so whatever.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm sure they'll take every good they can get. So.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious if people even have to do that anymore. He won that award in '81 in France,
Right.
and but he cut ties in 1980 with Phonogram because they wouldn't release that single. He ended up putting it out on his own label record company called Barking Pumpkin Records.
Which
And
he's a pumpkin and a black cat.
And a black cat. Yeah. Now, you being the big Zappa fan, you have a cat.
I have a
Zappa.
black cat named Zappa.
Yes.
The reason being, Zappa's favorite cats were black cats, and they asked him why. He said they're the underdogs. Everybody can have a white cat, a tabby cat. He goes, but the black cat's always. So he says, yeah. So I named my cat. I actually didn't. My ex-wife named Zappa, but I was like, yeah, that's cool.
Was she a Zappa fan too?
I got her into Zappa.
You got her in.
I don't know if she still listens to it, but because it might give her bad memories, but whatever. But
there might be some good memories. You might have had some Zappa on, some good moments. You never know.
I got a thing. It's been so long.
Let's
not reminisce.
That's my ex-wife.
Let's not reminisce that. But at that point in '81, he had an album ready called Tinseltown Rebellion, and it contained mostly live tracks from '79 and one studio track with material from the 1980 tour as well. The album was typical Zappa fanfare, but this album is known for guitarist Steve Vai.
Steve Vai's first appearance.
Steve Vai from Long Island, Massapequa, particularly.
Yes,
This
he
man
is.
lived in Massapequa. And he joined his touring band, Zappa's band, in 1980.
He's 20 years old.
20 years, yeah. Young
We
man,
spoke about this before.
Yeah. Now in '81, he saw the release of the double album called "You Are What You Is," and he recorded this in his new studio in his home called the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen Studios. Okay, and it was great. I mean, he could never leave his house. He could stay in his house.
Well, he said what I read in the real Frank Zappa book. He says, whenever I toured and I recorded live, he said usually the only places that had great mixing boards were New York, LA, and Europe.
Yeah.
He said, so I did well on a tour. He said I recouped more than I lost. So he said I built a studio in my basement. He did change the name though during the Iraq War. It was called the Utility Muffin Dairy Factory.
Because we dropped a bomb on the
Exactly.
I got it. Okay.
But,
Yeah. Now this album again, satirical, humorous. Okay. It hit targets on everything like religion, political hypocrisies, the media, whatever was going on at the time. I'm sure he was hitting.
Dumb All Over is on that album.
Right. Now there was one track called "The Heavenly Bank Account," which targeted TV evangelists, televangelists at the time. And if you remember the early '80s, I mean, televangelists were kind of getting hyped up a little bit because Reagan kind of was into them.
Swagger, Jim Baker.
Jim Baker. Okay. There was also a track called "I'm a Beautiful Guy," which targeted like the idea of making a lot of money, striving to be wealthy. Yeah, exactly. Right. In '81, he released 3 instrumental albums that originally were meant to be mail order only. Okay, one was called "Shut Up and Play Your Guitar." One was called "Shut Up and Play Your Guitar Some More," and the last one was called "The Return of the Son of Shut Up and Play Your Guitar."
I have all 3.
Do you?
Yes,
all instrumental.
There's some words.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
Like some of his great,
were they like lesson things, like learning?
No, it was just a lot of it was European from like 78.
Live shit.
Yeah, a lot of it was live.
There's
one song on there. It's called "While You Were Out," and it's 6 minutes long. And when I hear this song, literally, and I want to weep. It's so beautiful. This song, the melodies in it and his playing.
I've never heard of that.
Then he has a song, the first song on the first. It's called 555. It's in the time signature of 5.
That's hard.
And it's just like
That's hard.
It's like a fuck you to punk. Because it has a punk feel to it. It does.
It's fast. It's fast. But how do you play in 5/5?
555. That's. Hey, Dave Brubeck did it. Take 5.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess.
But it is. That is like my ex. Again, somebody I used to be involved with actually bought the whole set for me for Christmas, and I just
love brand.
It was 40 grand. It was very expensive.
It
was, but you're coming up to the 82, the Milan riots. Do you know about that?
No, well, let me talk about this 1982 thing, and you can tell us all about it. In May of '82, Zappa released the album "Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch." Great title, okay? The album featured his biggest selling single of all time, "Valley Girl." He had his daughter, Moon Unit, okay? That was his first kid, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do the vocals on that, and it's all just like, you know, Valley Girl language, like, you know, gag me with a spoon and grody to the max. Okay, all that 80s shit that we heard growing up, coming out of the San Bernardino Valley.
Yes.
All right. And he didn't win a Grammy, but he got Grammy nominated for that.
He did.
Okay. And you know, a lot of people know him, and that was a Dr. Demento song. That was actually on Dr.
Yes.
I remember that. Now, in '83, you want to talk about what you were going to say?
In '82, he did a tour of Milan, Italy.
Right.
And this is the infamous Milan riots. Now, Zappa recorded everything.
I heard of this, but they recorded. Okay, I don't know the details.
And in the liner notes of "You Can't Do This on Stage Anymore," volume 3, I think, he says, so we go to Italy, we go to Milan to play in a venue. He says basically it was a park with a shitload of mosquitoes around it with fences. He goes, if you listen in the background, you can hear the grenade launchers and tear gas launchers going on. They had a riot because
were they fighting communists or something?
What happened was, it was very hot that day.
Yeah.
The park that they called it a park was right next to a lake, which was filled with mosquitoes.
Wow.
And they came on stage, and the people started like not rioting. They were so happy to have somebody there to perform that the police, they were right. And literally, I have it on, you can hear like shit going on in America. So it's known as the infamous Milano riot of '82. I have a bootleg. I shouldn't say that, but I have a bootleg from that show. He does some of his best, like, he does, it's a good, if you can ever find it, it's Milan '82 bootleg, it's great.
It might be on YouTube, I'll look for it.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay, so a year later, in '83, the man from Utopia was released. The album, again, was eclectic, rock-oriented more at this point. It was kind of in the theme of Tinseltown Rebellion.
Yes.
There was a second album also released that year called London Symphony Orchestra Volume 1, and it featured orchestral compositions. The conductor was Kent Nagano. He was leading the London Symphonic Orchestra at that point, and he loved working with Zappa. He thought it was great. But Zappa, and this is funny actually, Zappa was actually not satisfied with those performances because the trumpet section went out on a break and went drinking, came back lumped up and was all out of tune. And it took like something like 40 edits in the studio to get like everything back right.
Well, Zappa was very anti-drug, you know. When you played for him, he wanted to be sober.
You're right, and I get it, but you're dealing with the British.
Exactly.
Right?
They like to go to the pub.
They went for their pub break, okay, and it
probably
was an hour.
Yeah.
Have some warm beer and come back, okay. But you know, he was unhappy with it. But I've heard it's actually pretty good.
I've heard pieces.
But I guess it's edited, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't have the raw footage of it, but yeah.
Now in '84, he would team up with Nagano again with a live performance called A Zappa Affair. And it was performed by the Berkeley Symphony Orchestra. Now, this
Berkeley,
was
California. Not Berkeley, Boston.
I think it's California.
Yes.
Berkeley, California. It was critically acclaimed, but they only performed it twice.
Right.
Because financially it was a flop.
Yeah.
It was kind of like I think there was stage sets and there was kind of like theatrical things going on.
Right.
Sets.
Which cost a lot of money.
It cost a lot of money, and I guess not a lot of people showed up. I guess or whatever. But it's critically acclaimed. Zappa, for the remainder of his career, was influenced by an early digital synthesizer called the Synclavier. I got kind of issues with this. I don't know how you feel about it. It basically did away with the need for musicians.
What year are we there?
Okay, we're getting towards the end. I got about a page and a half, Rob.
All right.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Because it kind of takes away the need for a musician.
It started like Jazz from Hell and on. Jazz from Hell came out in, I think, 86.
He was using that instrument. Yeah. It's not an instrument. It's
well, what I've read, and I've seen interviews of him from that period, he says, I can get everything the way I want it.
He was a control freak.
Yes, he was a workaholic, but yes, I think he had, like I said before, he had OCD issues, and he wanted, he said, I can hear it in my head, and this machine can do it.
Yeah.
So, and I think, after 1988, Broadway the Hard Way, which came out, which is a great album, he was done with touring because he wasn't making any money.
Yeah.
The musicians weren't up to snuff. And I got to agree with him. I've heard some of the stuff, and I didn't like the 84 to 88 band. I didn't care for them.
Yeah.
He had very good musicians in there, but I didn't like the drummer Chad Wackerman because he used a lot of Simmons drums, electronic drums.
Yeah.
And I thought it just cheapened.
With that like.
Yeah, he did a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Zappa figured out a way that he could just work in his house. Because Zappa he would work all night.
12 hours at least a day.
And he always said, he says, well, I sleep during the day while everybody else does their story. He said, I like working at night because nobody bothers me.
Right.
And yeah, like you said, he would just cigarette, he would just, and he had his 24 track, and he would make music.
He would noodle.
Yeah, he would noodle. Much.
Yeah, that's just what he did. Now, it was something, he would use this device, this Synclavier, but he also had a respect for live musicians still, so he was still using them at that point. The albums released in '84 was Boulez Conducts Zappa, The Perfect Stranger was called. There was something called Thingfish that came out, and Francisco Zappa featuring the Synclavier.
Yes.
Around 1986, Zappa oversaw the huge project of re-releasing and remastering all of his back catalog onto CD.
Yes.
You remember mid to late 80s, CDs were starting to take over. Things were coming out, coming out again that hadn't been out in many years on CD. He personally oversaw his entire catalog being remastered.
He did.
Some fans, though, felt he didn't do a good job. They felt that it wasn't true to the real recordings.
The purists, yes.
The purists. And you know what? I probably would have been one of those people in 1986, 87, all right? Because I resisted getting any CD until about 1991.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I saw the Misfits Walk Among Us on CD, available at Tower Records over there, that I knew. I said, the fucking world changed. I gotta
well, actually,
I gotta start getting.
That is probably the cleanest production of any Misfits I've
ever
heard.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time you could hear Danzig's fucking lyrics, clearly.
Exactly.
Oh, that's what he said? Oh, I've been singing the wrong thing for 5 years, But that's funny. But some people were critical of the CD releases, but it was a way to get his material that hadn't been able to, get before because things were out of.
I think he made more money doing this. honestly, in my own opinion,
He might have.
when he teamed up with Ryko,
Yeah.
which is now out of business, RYK.
Right, Ryko did.
They had a great. They were a Japanese company.
I remember them. Yes.
They were great. I had like tons of
I
stuff.
had stuff on there. Yeah.
Stuff that's like just out of print now. But the first thing I got was the reissue or the re-release of Shake Your Booty.
Yeah.
On that, I bought it in
on the Ryko disc. Yeah.
When it was on the Ryko catalog.
Yeah.
And I had no problem with it because I never had it on vinyl when I was a kid.
To hear it. Yeah.
So to me, it sounded good. You know.
Now, nowadays you can get again a lot of the Zappa back catalog on like 180.
Yeah, ZappaRecords.com.
Yeah, they're putting it all out, and I guess it might even be better sounding than what you've heard.
You got to realize though, there's still tons of stuff that's never been released.
He has there were vaults under his house.
Yeah.
Okay, where he had everything left and recorded. Probably just like did a show, put it up there, never saw it again.
Or he would pull it out and say, "Yeah, I'm going to take the bass track off that and mix it." He did a lot of that conceptual continuity, xenochrony. He was known for that. And that's one of the reasons why I like his music.
One thing I want to mention too is he was about 15 years ahead of his time because he was talking about, and it never got past the drawing board pretty much, but he was thinking about an idea of like a digital to digital transfer of music through phone lines or through cable lines, almost like a download. Yeah. And this was in the 80s, before the internet. Right? So he was trying to develop something like that. Had he lived, who knows? Maybe he would have. In '86, he got his first Grammy, finally, all right, for the album Jazz from Hell. The award was actually given to him in 1988. The album came out in late '86. It was under the Best Rock Instrumental category, and it was for the song Saint Etienne. The album was entirely instrumental, but it featured the new PMRC, Parents Music Resource Center, warning label. And we're going to talk about this a little bit because it's important to talk about Zappa. But I want to, and his censorship issues with Congress. His last tour was in 1988 with a 12-piece group that kind of fell apart before the album the tour could be completed.
Broadway the Hard Way.
Yeah, Broadway the Hard Way. They released the best band you've never heard in your life. It featured tracks from almost 100 new compositions that he had written for that tour. There was Broadway the Hard Way, and then the best band you never heard in your life. Unfortunately, the tour fell apart, but the live album, the best band you've never heard in your life, also had cover tunes like his version of Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, his version of I Am the Walrus by the Beatles.
Isn't Whipping Post on there?
Whipping Post is on there as well. Yeah. And an Allman Brothers song.
He didn't do many covers.
No, he did.
Well, I mean, in the early days he did.
Because he had to.
Directly from my heart.
Yeah. But from 70, the original. From probably 70 or 68 till that time, he hadn't done
he hadn't done many covers. No. But yeah, you're right.
Not even on studio albums, I don't think
he also on that tour, he did Ring of Fire.
That I didn't know.
A reggae version of Ring of Fire. Which,
really,
I listened to it and I'm like, okay, it must have been a reggae night, because he would do that.
He would do that. Yeah.
In the middle of the song, he goes, I forgot what song he goes, he can really go Hawaiian, and they start playing like the same.
Oh, he says it's Hawaiian.
He's like, oh, they can really go Hawaiian.
Reggae's gonna do Hawaiian.
No, but I'm saying like he would do that. Like, he would play because he would say, oh, the big rock stars that come out, they're all coked up, and they're like, yeah, man, we're gonna play our biggest hit. We're gonna play reggae style, and he would make fun of that.
Right, because they were assholes,
pretty much.
Now in 1990, Zappa got diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer.
Yeah.
Okay. It had gone undiagnosed for about 10 years, and it was determined as inoperable. There was nothing they could do about it. So he would dedicate the last 3 years of his life to modern orchestral music, and he would use the synclavier digital machine, whatever you want to call it, for most of those compositions. He did manage to conduct a few of these like orchestral concerts with different orchestras. A popular one at the time was performed in Frankfurt, Germany, and he did a song called G-Spot Tornado.
G-Spot Tornado.
Okay, and he had conducted the beginning overture.
Yep.
And then he did G-Spot Tornado going into it, so it was maybe a half hour or something like that.
Yeah.
He was doing. But he wasn't well, and he couldn't stand for that long. And he had to turn it over to conductor Peter Rundell.
Yep.
When he did that in Frankfurt, he got a 20-minute standing
Yes,
ovation.
yes, he did.
Amazing, amazing. You in here?
I don't know.
Hey, let's get in there. Hello. You know, it was obvious, and I remember those days when it was kind of like we knew Frank was sick. He was going to die. We knew that. Okay, it was just a matter of when.
Yep.
But recording from some of these orchestral shows that he did at the end would appear on his last album called Yellow Shark. The Yellow Shark.
Yep.
And that came out in 1993. Zappa, sadly, would pass away at his home December 14th, 1993, with his whole family at his side.
December 4th.
I'm sorry, excuse me, you're right. December 4th, I'm seeing the shit.
I know.
December 4th, 1993. He's buried in an unmarked grave at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. I guess his family.
He requested.
He
that.
requested that, right?
He said, "I don't."
You don't want people there.
In one of his last interviews, they said, "Do you want to be remembered?" He says, "No, it's not that important."
Okay.
And the man was very sick with cancer.
Yeah, amazing. Very sad. He only was 53 years old. Not even 53. Short of his 53rd birthday.
Yes.
Can you get in here a little bit?
Yeah. He would have been 80 this year. He would have turned 80 on the 21st of December.
Okay. One thing I want to talk about briefly, all right, is the PMRC hearings that he did in like 85 and 86.
Yep.
And for those of you who aren't old enough to remember, the Parent Music Resource Center was a group of senators' wives headed by Tipper Gore, Al Gore's ex-wife. You remember?
Ex?
Yeah.
They got divorced?
You don't remember that?
No, I don't.
He was getting happy ending massages, and he had to fucking.
While he was screaming about climate change,
yeah,
right? Okay,
right.
yeah.
On the plane that he was flying around, blowing carbon shit out of it, you know.
Yeah.
And he was getting, jerked off by massage people. Okay. Anyway, Tipper Gore, Democrat, headed that, and there was a hearing. I mean, it's classic. You could look it up online. He had Dee Snider, Twisted Sister, and Frank Zappa made a very great case about censorship and how it's wrong, and how they have no right to impose their will on us. Tell us what's obscene, what's not obscene.
Right.
If anything, it's up to your parents to tell you as a teenager you shouldn't be listening to that. Okay, but once you're 18, that shit's over with. All right, sorry. Okay, and they were putting these stickers. They still do. They put stickers on shit. It's even gotten worse because no one buys CDs anymore. But it's moved over to video games. Now video games are censored.
What did they tell you on the train?
What?
Zappa went in front of all these Washington bureaucrats and yada, yada, yada. And he said what he had to say. A few years later, he said, them putting stickers on our records, because there was records back then. There were CDs, but more records.
Records, yeah.
He said, make all of us a lot of money, so we should thank these people.
Yeah, because natural human behavior is if you tell me,
Don't
do that. That's dirty. You don't want to hear that. You're going to want to hear it.
It's like
you don't want to do it.
Back in the days, you got to go to the back of the record store and go, yeah, I need that Red Fox or Mom's
Right.
Angry album.
Right. I mean, back in the day when it was video stores, and you had the, behind the curtain was the pornos.
Yes.
You wanted to go back there. You were waiting for the one cool guy that would, work the video store, you let you go back there.
Here,
You know?
I hate to spoil it, but every video back there was Ron Jeremy.
Ron Jeremy. He's in jail, or sitting in jail right now.
That's what I hear,
Yeah. He can't make bail. He's got like 20 fucking women saying that he raped them. He sexually abused them. I'm not going to even opine on that right now.
I mean, you see Roger Quinn. Maybe he did. It's
possible.
In a way, rape them.
Ron Jeremy taught me everything I know. I'm just kidding.
It's like the old joke. What's a foot long filled with maggots?
What?
John Owens.
Anyway. All right. So everybody, thank you very much for listening to our Zappa podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan and Scott, for
Thank you,
coming
Mike.
on. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, brother.
Thank you, sir. It's tomorrow.
Okay,
But
tomorrow. There, it's close enough.
Gotta go to work.
Took you out today because it's Sunday.
Thank you, sir.
Right? And coincidentally, okay, there is a brand new movie coming out called Zappa. Brand new documentary coming out November 27th, which will be when you're catching an early live version of this podcast.
Jimi Hendrix's birthday.
Yeah, that's true.
Wow.
I forgot that. And this show will be aired again in the beginning of December, so probably a few days before. This movie is coming out. It's going to get a full release in theaters. It's called Zappa, and it's supposedly the most comprehensive documentary done. I think it's with the permission of the family and all that shit.
I hope his two older children get paid well for this.
Dweezil and whatever.
Because his two younger children are greedy monsters.
Ahmet.
Vomit.
All right.
And Diva.
All right. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we're going to do Grand Funk Railroad, which was another highly requested show that we do. Later, the week after that, we're going to be doing the British band, The Only Ones. And then the last weekend of December, we're doing a to-be-announced special live show. I don't have it all worked out yet. We're going to have some live music, but we're going to talk about possibly some good rock and roll movies. I think Scott the Clown will be on. It's going to be a whole fucking thing.
Scott the Clown.
Scott the Clown. Yep. So remember, everybody, what do we always say? Don't get drunk, get lumped up. Take care, people.
Good night. What's fun? I'm starving.
Yeah. I'm lumped up.
Yeah, I need another beer. But
Yeah. Get yourself.
Because I went outside before to smoke, and I stood under the thing, and it just went all the water hit my cigarette. And I was like, oh, that's not good.
Nobody likes you.
Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. Don't tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on the Rock Show.